congratulate them for a fight well fought, and essentially trying to show them that their actions were appreciated over the last several months, but they were up against unprecedented headwinds in her view. But in that letter, she also...
We're ending this live feed. Go back to another live feed, please.
The Donald Trump presidency begins now. Unclear if Vice President Harris will go that far. We understand that we do expect her to strike a more unifying tone. But again, these supporters here, we do see some cheering behind me. I'm told that Tim Walz is now coming up on stage, and I'm going to send it back to you, Lester.
Yeah, we're looking at Tim Walz now. Appears to be at the foot of the stage. We assume he will stand with the Vice President when she makes her remarks.
And for him, somebody who has made this turn onto the national stage, did you know 2 months ago, did most of America know who Tim Walz was? If he lived in Minnesota, maybe, right? But now, obviously, he has become a national figure in the audience for the speech. As you see some of the family members start to file in the hugs, the sunglasses, the crowd here at Howard University.
Last time we saw
them together was, of course, at the Democratic National Convention.
And I
Very
think
different
Hallie raises an important point, because Tim Walz joined the ticket. I think many Americans didn't know who Tim Walz was. And you didn't see the sort of traditional media blitz that you would expect from him.
All right,
it's not clear more Americans are familiar with
The
him.
Vice President has just been announced. We expect to see her in just any second now as she will approach the podium. Again, her family, her running mate there. Here is Vice President Kamala Harris.
Thank you all. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. So let me say, and I love you back. And I love you back. So let me say, my heart is full today. My heart is full today, full of gratitude for the trust you have placed in me, full of love for our country, and full of resolve. The outcome of this election is not what we wanted, not what we fought for, not what we voted for, but hear me when I say, the light of America's promise will always burn bright. As long as we never give up, and as long as we keep fighting. To my beloved Doug and our family, I love you so very much. To President Biden and Dr. Biden, thank you for your faith and support. To Governor Walz and the Walz family, I know your service to our nation will continue. And to my extraordinary team, to the volunteers who gave so much of themselves, to the poll workers and the local election officials, I thank you all. Look, I am so proud of the race we ran, and the way we ran it, Over the 107 days of this campaign, we have been intentional about building community and building coalitions, bringing people together from every walk of life and background, united by love of country with enthusiasm and joy in our fight for America's future. And we did it with the knowledge that we all have so much more in common than what separates us. Now, I know folks are feeling and experiencing a range of emotions right now. I get it. But we must accept the results of this election. Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory. I also told him that we will help him and his team with their transition, and that we will engage in a peaceful transfer of power. A fundamental principle of American democracy is that when we lose an election, we accept the results. That principle, as much as any other, distinguishes democracy from monarchy or tyranny. And anyone who seeks the public trust must honor it. At the same time, in our nation, we owe loyalty not to a president or a party, but to the Constitution of the United States. And loyalty to our conscience and to our God. My allegiance to all three is why I am here to say, while I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign. The fight for freedom, for opportunity, for fairness, and the dignity of all people. A fight for the ideals at the heart of our nation, the ideals that reflect America at our best. That is a fight I will never give up. I will never give up the fight for a future where Americans can pursue their dreams, ambitions, and aspirations, where the women of America have the freedom to make decisions about their own body and not have their government telling them what to do. We will never give up the fight to protect our schools and our streets from gun violence. And America, we will never give up the fight for our democracy, for the rule of law, for equal justice, and for the sacred idea that every one of us, no matter who we are or where we start out, has certain fundamental rights and freedoms that must be respected and upheld. And we will continue to wage this fight in the voting booth, in the courts, and in the public square. And we will also wage it in quieter ways, in how we live our lives, by treating one another with kindness and respect, by looking in the face of a stranger and seeing a neighbor, by always using our strength to lift people up, to fight for the dignity that all people deserve. The fight for our freedom will take hard work, but like I always say, we like hard work. Hard work is good work. Hard work can be joyful work. And the fight for our country is always worth it. It is always worth it. To the young people who are watching, It is. I love you. To the young people who are watching, it is okay to feel sad and disappointed, but please know it's going to be okay. On the campaign, I would often say, when we fight, we win. But here's the thing. Sometimes the fight takes a while. That doesn't mean we won't win. That doesn't mean we won't win. The important thing is don't ever give up. Don't ever give up. Don't ever stop trying to make the world a better place. You have power. You have power. And don't you ever listen when anyone tells you something is impossible because it has never been done before. You have the capacity to do extraordinary good in the world. And so to everyone who is watching, do not despair. This is not a time to throw up our hands. This is a time to roll up our sleeves. This is a time to organize, to mobilize, and to stay engaged for the sake of freedom and justice and the future that we all know we can build together. Look, many of you know I started out as a prosecutor, and throughout my career, I saw people at some of the worst times in their lives. People who had suffered great harm and great pain, and yet found within themselves the strength and the courage and the resolve to take the stand, to take a stand, to fight for justice, to fight for themselves, to fight for others. So let their courage be our inspiration. Let their determination be our charge. And I'll close with this. There's an adage an historian once called a law of history, true of every society across the ages. The adage is, only when it is dark enough can you see the stars. I know many people feel like we are entering a dark time, but for the benefit of us all, I hope that is not the case. But here's the thing, America, if it is, let us fill the sky with the light of a brilliant, brilliant billion of stars. The light of optimism, of faith, of truth, and service. It's you. And may that work guide us, even in the face of setbacks, toward the extraordinary promise of the United States of America. I thank you all. May God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America. I thank you all.
President Kamala Harris, her husband Doug Emhoff, at the conclusion of about a 15-minute speech, the vice president saying that she does concede the race to Donald Trump, and she says, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign, which includes a dignity for all people. If this was a speech, I'll addressing the panel here at large and I'll get you guys to weigh in. This was a speech that did not signal someone who was going to fade away. That, in her words, this fight will continue.
Yeah, do the work is her message, right? Get out there, keep fighting for what Democrats believe in, keep doing it, even in the face, as she said, of setbacks here. As you saw her come out and talk about first words there, her heart is full, she said, right? Trying to portray that positivity that she closed her campaign with, saying she feels a lot of gratitude for this moment, but being very clear about what Democrats need to do here, which is continue to keep up the fight against, obviously, the Trump administration, although she talked about a peaceful transfer of power is going to be essential. They will help, she says, the incoming president-elect and vice president-elect in this transition, which is going to be a critical moment.
Yeah, the peaceful transfer of power. I mean, it's not lost on anyone, of course, that the person that just beat her denied the results of the 2020 election. So there was an admonition, Kristen, built into this.
Absolutely. And she made sure to say that when she called President-elect Donald Trump, she stressed the importance of a peaceful transfer of power, and that being critical to our democracy. I also thought it was interesting. You asked the question while we were waiting for the vice president to speak. How would she look back on this campaign? What would she say about the race that she ran? She said, I'm proud of the race we ran and the way we ran it. Really defending the fact that she was, as you just heard her say, fighting for something larger: freedom, opportunity, fairness, dignity of all people. You're absolutely right. Sounds like someone who does not plan to fade away, and would not be surprised if we saw her on the campaign trail in 4 years.
And Lester, on that point, two thoughts. First, I wonder if there are Democrats out there wondering, where was this Kamala Harris for those 100 days? We wish we would have seen more of that candidate right there who delivered that speech. That's number one. Number two, we know who the head of the Republican Party is, right? It's President-elect Donald Trump. We know who the heir apparent is. It's J.D. Vance, the vice president-elect. Who's the head of the Democratic Party right now? It is no longer President Biden. It's unclear if it's Vice President Harris. Who's going to step up now for the Democrats? Because one of the victories that President Biden had was that he was able to hold off that red wave in 2022. They're facing a red tsunami now. So which Democrat's going to stand up to that red tsunami and change votes? Is it Hakeem Jeffries? I don't know. Maybe it's an outsider. Maybe the Democrats have to go outside their party like the Republicans did. We don't know.
We saw Governor Walz fighting back tears at one point, along with her family. Obviously, a very emotional moment.
It was incredibly emotional, and I think Tom raises a really interesting question, and it speaks to how this process all unfolded. The fact that there was no primary. President Biden stepped down after that really tough debate performance, and Vice President Kamala Harris was able to essentially solidify support within the Democratic Party around her. There are some within the Democratic Party who will question whether President Biden should have stepped aside sooner, whether they should have held a mini primary process. Could that have made the vice president a stronger candidate, for example? A lot of questions, but this moment, I think, about reflection, and again, where we began this conversation about unity, about reminding the country that in this democracy, a peaceful transfer of power is critical to this.
I wonder if there will be critics who will look at that speech, though, and see that maybe it went a little too far and it was perhaps a little too strong.
Well, she, in what sense? You think just the idea that...
I'm talking just the fact that she talked about the peaceful transfer of power, which you would expect her to, but under the circumstances.
No, that's a good point. One of the things that stood out to me to this end, Lester, is the idea that she talked about the coalition that she feels her campaign brought together, when in reality, we saw Donald Trump build a coalition that got him the popular vote for the first time since he's ever run for president. Something like, I'll defer to you on the board here. I haven't checked the popular vote in an hour, but 71+ million people across America backed President-elect Trump and not Vice President Harris. So to your point, Lester, I think that comes into play here. I also think about the timeline here, that this grappling process for Democrats is going to take a while. And what may be determinative to some degree is going to be control of the House of Representatives. If Democrats are able to establish a bulwark against what they see as the sort of agenda that they do not believe in from the Republican-controlled Senate and the Republican-controlled White House, that gives them an opportunity to, in some ways, push back, to not concede the fight, as the vice president put it in her speech. If the House goes into Republican hands, it is very difficult to see, what Democrats do from here. And then the other piece of this, I do sense to some degree kind of a level of exhaustion among some rank-and-file Democrats who have spent the last 8 years in the so-called resistance here against former President Trump, had pinned some hopes here on Vice President Harris as she came into the race late into the summer, and who maybe just having a moment of reeling a bit.
But to Tom's point, who will take over?
So it's a good question. I am not so convinced that we'll see Kamala Harris in 4 years. That might be a tough one, I think, for Democrats here. I do think you have up-and-comers inside the party, including some who are on her short list for the vice presidency.
Governor Josh Shapiro.
I look at Shapiro. I look at Governor Wes Moore of Maryland as somebody else. I look at Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan and some of these critical states here, right? Pennsylvania, Michigan, and beyond, as the people who are going to potentially be heir apparents here. Governor Gavin Newsom of California has made himself a national figure in so many ways here. That feels like the generation of Democrats that are coming up here. It's also a little bit mind-bending, can we just say, to be talking about 2026 and 2028 at this moment, but it's an important question because it speaks to where Democrats go from here.
You have a News Now show to put on.
I sure do, and you have nightly news too, so I know.
I don't mean to push you out the door, but I know you've got big work to do. I want to go back to Gabe Gutierrez at Howard University. Gabe, give us a sense of what it felt like to be there in that open field, that quad, as the speech took place.
Well, hey there again, Lester. As you can see behind me, the crowd is thinning out here, and we're watching the video there of Governor Tim Walz getting emotional. We saw several supporters here in that crowd, several women as they were walking away just now with tears in their eyes. And as you and Hallie and Kristen have been talking about, this is a very interesting speech. Before it, wanted to see how much she would mention former President Trump. She mentioned him just once when she was talking about her phone call with the former president. When his name came up, the crowd booed, but then immediately applauded a few seconds later when she talked about that peaceful transfer of power. Now, Lester, this wasn't so much of a concession speech as it was a call to action, at least in future elections. And it should be interesting to see, as you guys have been talking about, how this plays out within the Democratic Party. But as her campaign chair had said earlier in the day, there is a sense among the Harris campaign that they are already looking forward to the next fight. So in that sense, the speech was not unifying. Still, it was unifying around the idea of a peaceful transfer of power. I think something to look forward to next, Lester, is tomorrow. President Biden is set to deliver remarks here to talk about what's next in the transition. We also understand, as I mentioned earlier, that he did speak with former President Trump earlier today, and he spoke with him about, what happens next. And I'll turn your attention back to 2016. Remember those days in the aftermath of that, the surprise election back then, when former President Obama welcomed former President Trump into the White House. Again, we still don't have any details about when that will happen here. But as we look at these supporters stream out of Howard University, you can see many of them are very emotional, Lester.
Yeah, understandable. All right, Gabe, thanks. I want to go to Garrett Hake now. He's in West Palm Beach, Florida. I could assume that they were watching here, Gabe. I'm sorry, Garrett.
That's all right, Lester. We're all going on not a lot of sleep. I think that's a fair assumption, although I will say the former president has been uncharacteristically quiet since really his acceptance speech, and even before then. He hasn't posted on social media in something like 18 hours. He's been huddling with his team and his family at Mar-a-Lago. I know his team was eagerly awaiting those calls from the vice president and from President Biden today. I'll be very curious to see what he seizes on from this speech, the opportunity from the vice president to, talk about a peaceful transfer of power, talking about, the importance of the American experiment going forward, or talking about the fights that are still ahead. I will just say that in listening to your conversation there at the table, I do think there is absolutely no question about the future of the Republican Party right now. And I think we're just still kind of grappling with the degree to which this is Donald Trump's party now and into the foreseeable future. Look at the primary rivals of him who have come back into the camp over the last couple of days and even over the last couple of hours. Mike Pence, Trump's former vice president, who's, was turned on by Trump supporters on January 6th to the tune of people calling for his hanging, posting on X just a few minutes ago his congratulations to President-elect Trump and to J.D. Vance, saying his prayers and support will be with them. Donald Trump is going to ride into Washington with the backing of a united Republican Party. Still a question of whether they'll have the House, but certainly the Senate, and there will be a lot that he can do, although in a fairly short amount of time. I was talking to one longtime Republican and major donor today who remarked that, because he comes in as a lame duck, because of the midterms, which will come up in 2 years, Trump will basically have one legislative session, and not to be too nerdy about it, probably one reconciliation bill, one Republican-only bill in that first year to try to get so many of his big priorities loaded up and done in a very short period of time. We're looking at a very busy Washington in early 2025 in this second Trump era. Lester?
Okay, Garrett, thanks very much. And Tom Yamas is no doubt seeing numbers in his sleep. He draws maps in his sleep now after the duty at the big board.
Every vote counts,
and you're
right?
still counting.
We're still counting. Every vote
That's
counts.
what I was trying to get
out there. Maine has just, we're projecting that Kamala Harris is going to win 3 of the 4 Maine electoral votes there. One of the congressional districts is going to go towards former President Trump. Again, Maine, like Nebraska, it separates the way they give electoral votes, popular vote, and then congressional districts as well. As we look at the map here, still waiting on Nevada, still waiting on Arizona and Alaska, it looks like on the map there. But again, a lot of the battlegrounds, the majority of the battlegrounds in the Trump column. Speaking of Trump, Lester, I had a flashback when we were talking about 2016 there. President-elect Trump got to work immediately. I remember going to Trump Tower for those meetings. You'll remember everyone was there, from network news anchors to Kanye West, as he was building his cabinet and building his sort of plan of what he was going to do when he got to the White House. I wonder how quickly he's going to start.
I think it's a great question because, remember, he has said he believes he has a mandate. He's been very clear about his agenda. He wants to start a mass deportation force immediately. He wants to slap huge tariffs on China. He wants to extend the Trump tax cuts. And by the way, Republicans are saying that's top of their agenda. So we will watch very closely to see how he begins to impose all of these, because particularly when it comes to the deportation plan, we haven't seen any firm proposals. So a lot of questions about how that's actually.
Well, my thanks to both of you, Hallie, as well. That concludes this NBC News special report. We'll have much more ahead on our streaming network, NBC News Now, online at NBCnews.com, and tonight on a special edition of NBC Nightly News. I'm Lester Holt in New York. Thank you for watching, everyone. Good day.
Great job. Oh, man. Okay. Good job. Good job.
On behalf of the Mek Wi Talk program, I want to say thank you all for watching. Thank you all for being a part of this program. God bless you. May God bless our island home, Jamaica land we love. Have a great afternoon, everyone.